Fantasy thrillers, Spectre of Intention, and the Shades of Venice series. A resident of Hillsboro, Oregon, Tonya lives with her husband, children's author Raymond Macalino, and their two wildly imaginative kids. She is an avid collector of folklore and folk history, far too many to fit comfortably within the pages of any given book. When not working on her latest thriller, she enjoys coaching other writers through the How to Build a Book workshop at Jacobson's Books and More. Tonya is the current president of NIWA, the Northwest Independent Writers Association.
So we're going to have a brief theme here of memories. Thanks for setting me up. All right. The stones speak, I listen. That's just a little catchphrase I love. I want you to come on a little trip. We're going to central Idaho. It's in the peak of summer. This is high desert country. You've got the heat pushing down on you. It's burning your skin as you're just standing there. The only thing that even makes it bearable is a really sharp wind that very kindly flicks you in the face with your hair. The sand is all around you. It's dotted with sagebrush, a few wildflowers, some burnt grass. And then up above on the horizon is a split rail fence that's managed to catch a big old tumbleweed. But behind that is this sky that is so amazingly blue. You sit there and you're like, how on earth can I tell somebody about this amazing view that I have? But I can't. Azure, boring. You know, it's all been used. It's all been done to death. How can I make somebody feel what I'm feeling when I see this? So you're there. It's so hot. You're standing next to the car. You're like, let's go back in. There's air conditioning in there. But of course, your kids run off down the trail, and you come out on the edge of a plateau. Everywhere you look for miles, it's this beautiful gold, but that's all there is. There's a valley down this way. There's a winding river up there, and as you look off in the distance, you can see that there's another plateau that's kind of crumbling into the river. And then your mom walks up and she says, "That's where I worked during the summer, or during the summers in college." And she's like, "When there was a big flood during the Lake Monville days, and it came round that bend and caught hundreds of animals of all kinds and buried them in that slope." And so you can kind of start to picture this in your mind, and you realize that this whole landscape used to be filled with marshes and ponds and lakes and lush greenery. And you can kind of feel what she felt. She was this, nobody Idaho girl who was working on a dig that became so significant that all the finds went to the Smithsonian Institute. It was pretty amazing. You feel that excitement. You can feel the dirt crumbling under your fingers. You can imagine being the one to find the next big animal that has never been cataloged before. And it's a life remembered. It's a story that you haven't seen before. So you're rounding up the kids. You want to get back to that car. You're dying. They're having fun. You're dying. And your dad, as you're walking back, points down the valley and he says, "See those two little lines down up there at the bottom of the valley? It's a tiny little valley." And he says, "That's the Oregon Trail." And you're like, "Oh, I'm standing right next to the Oregon Trail." And then, you've got this whole other picture in your mind about, walking along in this, like, you have to be out in this oppressive heat. You can't get out of it into your air-conditioned car. You hear the creaking and the clattering of, like, all your hopes and dreams that, people have died in your party, and you know that you only have so far to go, but your provisions are almost gone. You're about a state away from where you're trying to get to. And you're so close to the goal, but you're just exhausted from that constant physical beating. And you want to lean down to that person and say, just hang on for a few more miles, because down that trail, just a few more miles, is the Sorensen house. And they'll take care of you. They'll get you something to eat. They'll get you some water. My family will take care of you. Places hold such powerful stories. I've always found it completely fascinating. A little crook in the river, a little dip in the landscape, and it's like a moment that lets you reevaluate your own moment. You kind of get a chance to reset, rethink, reimagine where you're at, what you're trying to do, where you're trying to be. Because in those big moments that are remembered in the landscape, it kind of starts to put things in perspective a little bit.
Okay.
In all my books, I try to capture that kind of richness of what came before. In Spectre, I focused on stories from the early space program, not because they were a moment captured in a place, but they were a moment captured inside. Like, it's that absolutely unimaginable pioneering drive that gets us through these impossible things, these things that we should not be able to do. I mean, everybody told these people they were going to die when they tried to do this. And so this woman has come to a place in her life where she absolutely should not be able to go to that next bigger place. And those are kind of the stories that are the metaphor for that. And then in Faces in the Water, it's set in Venice. So 2,000 years worth of amazing stories that kind of put your own life in perspective. So you've got kind of like that flamboyant but mysterious shadowed history of Venice, and then the main character is from Montana, so you get that kind of really earthy, and for most Americans a little bit easier to identify with, whereas the Venetian stuff kind of gets a little bit almost fable-like in its very often retelling. So my book for tonight is Stealing Lucifer's Dreams. It's the second in the series. And I pulled a short little excerpt because second books are tricky. You're going to get in trouble if you do spoilers. But I'll give you a little setup. So Elise is in the flooded ruins of Venice. This is a little bit in the future. She's on the run from a man named Jurgen, who's kind of like the evil Bill Gates. She has just finished talking to a professor about a woman named Veronica Franco. So if you don't know who she is, she was kind of the most famous courtesan of her era. She was what they called an honest courtesan. She not only entertained physically, but she was expected to entertain intellectually as well. So poetry, philosophy, music, all of that. She was particularly gifted with all of that. It was actually one of the only ways that women could get an education back then, except for, and don't think that getting sent to the nunnery was, got you off the streets. They also contracted out. So she's got all these snippets of poetries and letters kind of floating around in her head from this woman, from the professor talking about her, and we're kind of left in this state of not really being super sure if she's dreaming what's happening next, or if it's actually happening. And just to give you a little context, my stuff is kind of like a cross between Pan's Labyrinth and Laura Croft Tomb Raider. So it's high action, but it's kind of surreal. So hopefully that will make this all clear as mud. I knew I was sleeping. I could still feel the frustrated hum on my skin, sense the light of day, red through the closed lids of my eyes. And yet I was trapped in the dream. I stood amidst the ruffling sheer steel curtains of Jurgen's office, overlooking the flooded St. Mark's Square. I watched the toxic water sway with the wind and the pull of the twilight moon. How lucky you are, blessed Venice, to hold that man close. Venice. Venice. To eat with someone else's mouth, to sleep with someone else's eyes, to move according to someone else's desires, clearly running toward the wreckage of your faculties in your life. What misery could be worse? I knew he stood behind me before his words pressed against my ear, finishing the letter. You leave me. Among all possible mundane calamities, this is the extreme one. But then if we add to the worldly considerations all those relating to the soul, what a perdition and certainty of damnation is this one. She's speaking of being the courtesan. I glanced behind me, saw his too perfect face leave cold in its artful symmetry. He drew a lock of my hair back behind my shoulder, leaving his view unobstructed. His hands wrapped around my bare shoulders. It didn't hurt. Beneath the constriction of the strapless black gown I wore, my heart shuddered, electric. Those are her words, Veronica Franco. You can see how her view of the courtesan's life began to change. the greatest and proudest of her profession, to give oneself as prey to many. Those are not the words of the girl who once reveled in her hedonistic freedoms. His skin brushed my cheek in the barest ghost of a touch as he spoke. Jürgen, I will not turn myself over to you or that woman. The pressure of his hand slid down my arms, shifted to my waist. You won't have a choice. His fingers dug ever so slightly into the soft flesh beyond my hip bones. I could not hide the tremor in my breath. You will come to me, or Harry will break you. She will destroy the pieces of your heart, one by one. Innocent victims you've endangered through your pride. She awakens even now. Her servants deliver the news of your survival, the news of your weakness. She will not abide your lack of fealty, not in her domain. Soon, perhaps not even in mine. His lips grazed my jaw, his hands across my torso pressed me hard against him. The tremble spread from my breath to my body. I saw my breast shoved high, barely contained above the neckline of my gown. He was taking me apart, unpicking my will thread by thread. Terrified, I reached for the open window. It was like plunging my hands into ice. Something was out there, something deadly. I snatched my hands back, my trembling turned to shaking. So long she has slept, she sleeps no more. His lips pressed to my ear. Come to me, Elise. Come to me and live. No. I slammed a heeled shoe down on his foot, drilled an elbow in his ribs. His arms barely loosened enough for me to twist around. Let me go. I reared back for a headbutt, but he recognized the move and leaned out of the way. It gave me enough room to free an arm. I landed a tight left hook square on his jaw. Jürgen stumbled back. I grabbed at my skirt like some kind of dark Cinderella and ran. I wrenched open the door before he caught my arm. Elise, she will kill them all, and it will be on you. Don't do this. I am responsible for these people. Please don't put any more deaths on my conscience. For a moment, as I struggled against his hold, I saw beneath that regal perfection the flicker of a man tired of grief. I snarled against the last of these tricks. With my entire body weight, I yanked. Let me go. He released me. I fell through the doorway and into the nothingness beyond. So that's a little taste of Stealing Lucifer's Dreams. It's back there. It is book 2, and book 2 is very hard to understand without book 1. So just giving you a heads up.